So I'm starting out in the main RO Writer module, where we're going to talk about View, Add, Edit, or really your inventory in general. I'm going to pick on my friend Jennifer Quinn down here at the bottom. And as we talk about parts that are in your master inventory, what we're really talking about is adding parts onto a transaction, being able to not only track their movement, have pre-established prices, track on-hand values. So in my example, if I just came up here and clicked on the parts icon, I'm going to type in 27082 MP, and then search my master inventory. And when I do, it's recognizing that that 27082 MP is an oil filter that I have in my master inventory. I've got an established selling price of $6.99 as well as 4 on hand in my local inventory. So at its most basic, just being able to add a part onto a transaction from our master inventory, we have to be able to add and or modify that information that exists about that part. The window that we're going to get to eventually as we begin our conversation about the View, Add, Edit piece of inventory is also accessible through this Go to INV button. There's actually quite a few ways throughout the program where we can get to the View, Add, Edit window. Again, in this case, as I clicked on Go to INV, which on that icon there stands for inventory, it takes me into the View, Add, Edit window of inventory where I can make any modifications and or see any of the additional information that's available about this particular part. I'm going to click on Cancel to close back out of here, cancel to close out of my parts search, and cancel one last time just to get back to my ticket for Jennifer Quinn. So at its most basic, as I click on the part icon and I search my master inventory, is how the View, Add, Edit functionality has relevance into what we're doing on a day-to-day basis within our Writer. Now, if I was going to use, say, for example, Smart Jobs to add a part onto a transaction, if we're going to go do an oil change for this particular customer, as we're going through our oil change, it's searching not only for my capacity, but then secondarily for the oil filter that I have available. Where did it find it in my local inventory? Again, that's a 27082 MP filter. I have 4 of them in stock. $6.99 is my selling price to the consumer. $2.28 is my cost. All of this information is coming out of my local inventory, and it's getting added in or modified through the View, Add, Edit function of the inventory module. I'm going to click on the X in the upper right-hand corner. It's just one other example of the way that we can use View, Add, Edit, or the way it comes in or has relevance. I'm going to go ahead and look at tire quote over here on the left-hand side. As I do, I'm going to throw in a 215, 55, 17 as my tire size, and then either hit the Enter key on the keyboard or click on Search. And it again, search it through my master inventory to find any tire that fits that particular size. In this case, you'll see that I've got 4 of these Hankook tires. My cost $97.31, selling price of $137.99 to the consumer. So again, the fact that I can find it in here, or the fact that I'm able to see it in SmartyCat, or just through the part icon, again, all is driven by my master inventory, which again, managed through the View, Add, Edit function. I'm going to leave our Writer for just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and go over to my inventory module. And as I launch over to inventory, underneath the inventory icon, there's a submenu. It's View, Add, Edit, or it's Inventory Entry. I'll tell you that we'll talk about both as we go along through today's conversation. However, I will tell you that those windows look exactly the same. If you were to open either, you would not see any differentiation between the two. There is one subtle nuance or one difference in the behavior of the two windows. And as we finish up this afternoon's conversation, we'll talk about the difference between the two. For our purpose, we're going to spend the majority of our time underneath View, Add, Edit. When I click on View, Add, Edit, in my case, I've got the functionality to be able to come into this window password protected. So it brings me into my inventory screen. Again, the same window that we were in just a moment ago going from the main RO Writer program. Again, there's a large number of ways that we can get into this particular window from various points inside of the program. Again, its primary access point being through inventory and then View, Add, Edit. Let's take another look at that oil filter, that 27082 MP. As I put a part number into this window here, you'll notice there is no search box. So I can't click a button and have it go search my inventory to see whether or not there is any, there is any existing information about this part. I have to hit the Enter key on the keyboard, which does my search and brings up my parts list window, where I can see again that I've got 4 of these on my shelf. $6.99 is the retail. When I click on OK, it brings me and it shows me the information about that part. If you'll notice, just about all the information is grayed out, and that's because we're not going to modify that information unless at the bottom of this window I click on Edit. When I click on Edit, again, in my case, I've got it password protected to be able to edit the information in this window. It then brings me into the record for that 27082MP. Now, the only piece that's grayed out is the part number. Because it doesn't want me to change the part number, I can change any other aspect of this window except for the part number, because that's kind of the primary, that's the tie. As we're looking through this window here, part number is 27082MP, and as we talk about the different aspects or pieces that we can see, this is everything we know in our master inventory about that particular part number, starting with the description. Description is fairly self-explanatory. As we add this part onto a transaction, that's what it's going to say on our estimate or invoice that we present to the consumer. If we're running inventory reports, this is the description that it will show to us as we're seeing it on that inventory report. Beneath that, we've got our alternate number, which in this case is SFI 123. The way the alternate part number works is if I was going to search anywhere within my RWriter system using the alternate number, then it would find that SFI 123 and return me the primary. For example, I went into Quick Part up here at the top of the screen, and down here where it says alternate number, and I search for SFI 123. When I either hit the Enter key on the keyboard or click Search, it says, well, that's the alternate part number for 27082MP. So when I search this box here, it's actually driving to this window here, but returning me the actual part number itself. Similarly, if I'm on the Add Part window, so if I came into the part here and I said, well, you know what, I know that used to be an SFI 123. If I check the box here that says alternate number and then search my inventory, then it says, again, well, I know that that's a 27082MP. So that's our ability to search for one part number and have it return us another based upon, again, an alternate part number, whether it's a supersession or whether it's a good, better scenario. I search here, but I get returned the primary value, the 27082MP. To the right of that is the line code. Each part number and line code defines a unique part record. What I mean by that is, in the automotive aftermarket, there are duplicate part numbers all over the place. A 1234 might be a spark plug from Bosch, or an air filter from Fram, or a muffler from Walker. What delineates it as a unique part record is the line code. So the part number and the line code together make up that unique part record inside of the system. Line codes are especially important if you're ordering things electronically. If I wanted to submit that order for those 1234 spark plugs, and I send it to my vendor, the vendor says, I need to know not just the part number, because I may have 10 different numbers in my master inventory that are 1234. I need to know what line code in order to identify exactly which part we want to deliver. So we've got the line code, and then to the right of that, there's a box that says Package Add. Package Add was functionality that was added primarily to support what's called RWriter Express. RWriter Express was a module of RWriter that was designed primarily for the quick lube industry. So it was added in support of the RWriter Express function. However, it does work within the core product as well. There is a caveat, or there is a configurable setting that needs to get turned on in order to make that work. The concept of the package add is we're going to do an oil change, and it's going to be $29.99. And most cars and light trucks are $29.99. However, if a Mercedes or a BMW came rolling into the shop, they're probably not part of that $29.99 oil change, not only because they probably take full synthetic oil, but also because their filter is going to be $19 at cost or $25 at cost before we even get into a markup and a sell. So what the package add can do is we can tell the system whenever this part gets added onto a package, then increase the dollar amount of the package by X amount. We're to make this $10, for example. When we added this part onto a package, as opposed to it being $29.99, if that's my base price for an oil change, it would be $39.99 because we're adding $10 to the package. Now again, I said there was an asterisk or a configurable setting that comes into play when using the package add functionality. So I'm going to leave the inventory window here for just a moment. I'm going to go back over to RWriter so I can access the configuration module. Because underneath the configuration header, if I go down to repair order and then RO options at the very top of my submenu, when I get into this window here in the lower right-hand corner, my section says package and the button says options. In this window here, you'll notice there's a checkbox at the top of the screen that says use package discounts. In order for that package add functionality to work in the manner in which I described, meaning changes the package from 29 to 39, we have to use package discounts. The concept of a package discount is kind of, as I explained it, similar to what we do when we go through to a fast food restaurant. Meaning if I was going to go to McDonald's and I was going to order a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke, if I ordered them each as individual menu items, the Big Mac would be $3, the fries would be $2, and the Coke would be $1, and I'd pay $6 for my lunch. If I order a number one, which includes a Big Mac, fries, and a Coke, and I pay $4.99, I have a package savings of $1.01. Same concept as far as packages are concerned inside of our writer, meaning if I'm going to do an oil change, it really encompasses three different elements. It's the oil, it's the filter, and then it's also the labor that we're charging to replace that oil and filter. So if the oil was going to be $3 a quart and I'm putting 5 quarts of oil in, then the oil would be $15. I retail that filter for $5, so that's $20 in parts. The labor is 2/10 of an hour at my $100 an hour labor rate, so $20 in labor as well. So if I just sold to the individual components, the oil, the filter, as well as the labor, the charge would be $40 if I was billing at the individual price. However, we've got a package of $29.99, so therefore, if I use package discounts, then it says, well, you saved $10.01, Mr. Customer, by buying the oil change of the package. Isn't that smart of you rather than buying them individually? So package discounts, again, from the concept of bringing multiple different elements underneath an umbrella, is driven, again, primarily by that quick lube and or express functionality, but it is available inside of the core product. Again, if you go in and you make a change, that package add value, and you're not using package discounts, then when we add that part onto the transaction, it won't modify or change the dollar amount of the package. I'm going to change that back to 0 only because I'm not utilizing package discounts. So it won't make a difference whether we have a value in that package add or not. Down from there, there's an option or a bar that says UPC code. We have barcode scanning functionality inside of our writer. And as I'm back over in the RO Writer window, if I'm in this window right here, and I walked up to the counter and I had a UPC code in my hand, I could scan it, and it would add that part onto the transaction. It would actually do one of two things. If it recognizes the UPC code, so if I was to look at my oil filter, my 826574938 UPC code, if I scanned that UPC code, it would immediately drop onto my ticket one of these 27082 MP filters. If I scanned it again or a third time, it would just continue to increment the value, meaning we've got 2 or 3 or 4 as we scan it each time. So if I wanted to add 5 quarts of oil, and I've got a quart of oil sitting in front of me, I could just scan it 5 times, and it will go ahead and it would drop that onto the transaction. Now, if I didn't have a UPC code filled in, and I scan that UPC, if I go back over into my main RO Writer window, I'm right here and I scan that UPC, and that UPC is not recognized, meaning it's not associated with any part in my master inventory. What the system will do is it will pop up on the screen, and it will ask us to identify what part that UPC code belongs to. So I scan it, and it's not a recognized UPC. The system tells us, please enter in the part number that this UPC belongs to. So we build that database over the course of time. The first time I use it, I scan it, then I have to tell it what part it is. From that point forward, it knows the UPC code that is associated with that part. Now, one last caveat to that particular statement there, and that is when we go to first utilize a scanner with our writer, and we've got a number of different scannable functions inside of the program, we do have to program the scanner. And what I mean by that is there's a page of barcodes, 7 in all, top to bottom, that will tell the scanner the language that our writer is looking for. And all you do is you just print out that page, you scan it top to bottom, you'll hear a series of beeps as you go along. And then once you get to the bottom, the scanner has now been programmed to work with our writer. So if you have a handheld or a barcode scanner and you'd like us to send you over that document with those UPC codes, go ahead and just send an email back to training@rowriter.com. You could reply back to the email that came out with information about today's webinar, and we could send you a PDF that can then be printed. One last caveat as far as barcode scanning is concerned, we have a couple of different symbol scanner models. that we have certified or that we've recommended with our integrated scanning functionality. There are some scanners out there on the marketplace that we don't or are not compatible with. So if it's not a simple scanner and it's not one that we've certified with, there's certainly the possibility that we won't be able to support it. QR scanning is something that we've adopted, or we haven't necessarily gone to that level of detail, but there are some simple QR scanners that we support in that function as well. Back down to inventory, the last piece as far as scanning is concerned, we don't currently have a handheld inventory count function. So that UPC function that you've got there, as opposed to the guy at the grocery store that's scanning inventory on the shelf, we don't currently have a handheld inventory scan device. I will tell you that someday, but not today. As we continue on through our conversation about the inventory view and edit window, continuing down in that upper section, the next one there says other information. This is just a notation field, meaning if you'd like to enter anything in about this part, you can do so in the other information field. It's only visible in this window here, meaning it won't get added onto the documents we present either to the technician or the customer. We won't see it on any reports. It's only visible in this window here as we come in from whatever various point we entered our view at edit window. Down from there, we've got information about the cost, meaning we start with average cost. In the system, we support average cost, and then we support vendor cost, meaning if you'll notice, I've got an average cost of $2.28 per, as well as a vendor cost of $2.28. The way that these behave are, this is, for the ones that I've got on my shelf, the average that I paid for those. If I went out and I bought 10 parts, or 10 of a part for $1 a piece, then my average cost is $1, and my vendor acquisition cost is $1. I went out to buy 10 more, and the price had gone from $1 to $2. So I now own 20 of them. My total cost was $30, so therefore my average cost is $1.50. My last acquisition cost was $2, so I would see $1.50 as my average cost, my acquisition cost of $2. And this acquisition cost gets used when we're generating a purchase order or when we're posting a receipt. The average cost gets used when we're adding that part onto a transaction, whereas we're calculating out the selling price for those parts. So two different cost values inside of the system, and along with our primary supplier, we can actually have up to 3 different suppliers associated with a part, as well as 3 different last acquisition costs. So I usually buy these from Napa at $2.28. I couldn't get them from Napa one day, so I bought them from AutoZone. They cost me $2.10, or I bought them from CarQuest and they cost me $2.26, whatever the variable would be. But so we can have up to 3 different suppliers associated with any one part, along with, again, 3 different last acquisition costs. Back up to our cost value up here, it's my average cost. To the right of that, there's a button that says Calc Prices, and I've got prices in there at $6.99, $5.70, $2.28, $2.85, and $3.42. But I'm going to wipe all those out just so that we can see how they come back or where they come from. So I'm going to go ahead and just make all of those 0, and then I'm going to click that button there that says Calc Prices. The way that these behave, you'll notice they came back exactly to where they were previously. The $6.99 is driven by smart pricing. This little question box out here to the right-hand side will tell us exactly why it decided that $6.99 was the right price. And as it looked at this part, well, I'm using my oil filter matrix, which is 2.5 times, which worked out to be $5.70. Rounded up comes to $5.99, but I have a minimum price for any oil filter of $6.99. That's why price 1, or what I call retail, became $6.99. Price 2, 3, 4, and 5 are driven by the department that is assigned to that part. So down here in the lower left-hand corner, filters-oil is my department. If I was to go look at the configuration of that department, and I'll hit the plus key here to the right-hand side to get into my department configuration window, what you'll see is if I go down to filters-oil, I've got 2 for my retail price. Now that gets overridden because I'm using smart pricing, but 2.5, 1, 1.25, and 1.50. So if you did the math, 2.5, 1, 1.25, and 1.5. If I change that, then let's make the list price 4 times. Let's leave the net where it is. We're going to sell it to our employees for 1.10, so 10% above my cost. If I'm going to transfer it, we'll make it 1 3/4, or we'll transfer it at a 42% profit. I click on Save, and now what you'll notice is if I hit Count Prices again, let's cancel back out of my department configuration window. When I hit Count Prices again, Now it's $9.12. That's my 4 times, or my 1.1 and or my 1.75. So the calc prices is driven by my department and or the price 2, 3, 4, and 5 by the markups associated with that department as we go through. If I don't have a department associated with a part and I hit calc prices, again, my default matrix applies to price 1. Prices 2, 3, 4, and 5 are actually driven by, back over into the configuration window, underneath configuration down to parts, down to price levels, and then default pricing. So if there is no department associated with that, prices 2, 3, 4, and 5 will be driven by whatever values I have configured in this window here. So again, if we want to have variable pricing based upon the type of part, then we assign the department first before we hit calc prices, and or if we're just using the default, then the department becomes somewhat irrelevant from that perspective, and I can just hit that calc prices, and it goes then again to my default pricing. Talked about suppliers as well as just a bit about the department. As we move to this window on the right-hand side of this box over here in the lower right-hand corner, we've got our on-hand value. So again, I own 4 of them. That's what my system is showing me as we search for the part. I'll tell you that if you'll notice, you can change your on-hand value in this window here. My recommendation, and or whether I'd like you to see it used, is that we don't change the on-hand value in this window here, provided that we're using the inventory module. Meaning, if we don't have the inventory module, then that's my opportunity to adjust the on-hand value. Come into this window here and tell the system here is how many of a part that we have. However, if we're using the inventory module, then the system will allow us to post purchase orders or do cycle count adjustments or post receipts from a vendor or transfer parts in and out, keep them on my shelf after a part's return. So any number of different ways that we can record the movement of a part. And the reason that I recommend that you do it through one of those functions as opposed to in here is if we do that in here, we keep no audit record of that change, meaning I just changed it from 4 to 6. Nowhere did it record an adjustment that says we made the change from 4 on hand to 6 on hand, versus if we did it as a purchase order or an adjustment or we post the receipt, the system keeps track and we should be able to see all of the movement of a part throughout its life cycle. Okay, so I received 5, I sold 3, I went and received 2 more, I counted my inventory, I had 1 less than I expected, so I adjusted it down. We should be able to keep track of the flow of a part up and down in terms of the on-hand throughout the course of its life cycle in our writer. So again, while you can change it here, unless you're not utilizing the inventory module, then my recommendation would be use the appropriate function in inventory to make those on-hand adjustments as opposed to doing it right through this window here. But here's what I own from a cost of goods perspective. I own 6 of those parts. I've got a stock 2 of 12 and a reorder at 6. So if you're going to use the auto build function or a min-max ordering parameter, stock 2 is the number we want to put on our shelf. Reorder at is the number that we're going to generate an order, meaning in this case, my on-hand is 6, where I to generate a suggested order, the system would then reorder from 6 back up to 12. So there'd be a delta of 6 that we want to place on that order. My on-hand was still at that original value of 4, then obviously this value below this value, as we generate the order through purchase order management, it's going to order up to this value here. In this case, 8 would be the suggested to order as we go through. Beneath that, and then off to the right, there are boxes that say MOQ, package quantity, and item size. Now these work in conjunction with the inventory order to try to help us produce an order in which in quantities in which the vendor will ship. What I mean by that is MOQ stands for minimum order quantity. So it basically says don't order less than this amount. In my case, the vendor will ship just 1 of these if I was to order it. So the MOQ would be 1. But if I had something where, you know what, I get a price break on this when I get to this number, so don't ever order less than this, I can put that in as the MOQ, the minimum order quantity. To the right of that, we've got our package quantity. Now the package quantity basically says that this is the number of items that a vendor will ship in any one package. In this case, this is a 27082 MP, the MP standing for Master Pack. This is a case good, meaning NAPA will not break apart a case. If I order 1, they're going to ship me a case of 12. So as I assign this to the purchase order, it's going to order in quantities of 12. If I order 1, I'm going to get 12. If I order 8, I'm going to get 12. If I order 13, I'm going to get 24. So it will continue to increment by that value of, or that rounding parameter, or that package quantity of 12. The way that the system works as it's generating an order, if we're using an auto build to determine my suggested order, in this case, it would say, well, I need 8 of those in order to replenish to my stocking model. It would suggest to order 12. If I needed 13 of them, it would still suggest to order 12. If I needed 17, it would suggest to order 12. Once I get to 18, well, now it needs a case and a half in theory, so now it's going to round up and want to order 24. So as we get halfway to that next delta, it says, okay, now it's time to order a second package, so order 24, as opposed to just ordering 12 and or trying to order just 18. So MOQ and package quantity are designed in order to try to produce an order in the quantities in which the vendors will ship. Now, there's also a configurable aspect to this piece as well. So I'm going to leave inventory for just a moment, go back over to configuration. Under the configuration header, I'm going to mount to parts, and then in the very bottom of that window, I've got an option for PO, transfer, and other parts options. In this window here, the specific setting that I'm referring to or alluding to in this case is apply ordering rules based on package quantity and minimum order quantity. Meaning, as we go through to generate that suggested purchase order, make sure you're paying attention to this value and this value. If that box is not checked over on the configuration side, then it would just try to order 8 of these, regardless of what the vendor would ship in. To the right, beneath package quantity, there's a box there that says item size. Now, item size is used when the vendor ships more than one sellable unit in an individual part. Meaning, for example, I've got a wiper blade, and most wiper blades come in a blister pack that has 2 blades in one single box. If I order 1 wiper blade from my vendor, I get 2 sellable units. If I order 10, I get 10 boxes, each containing 2 sellable units, or 20. In that case, my item size is 2. So when I receive one of those into my inventory, the actual on-hand inventory gets incremented by a value of 2. Oil is another good example where package or item size can come into play. If you're stocking oil in bulk, when your vendor comes in to fill your bulk tank, they likely will fill you in gallons. So I went and put 50 gallons of oil into your bulk tank. However, when we sell it to the consumer, we sell it by the quart, 5 quarts of oil. So in that case, got 4 quarts to a gallon, so my item size would be 4. As they come in and deliver me 50 gallons of oil, the system does the math and say, well, 50 times 4 increments my on-hand inventory by a value or a factor of 200. Moving back up from where we were, total sold is forever and ever. So since the very first time this part was ever entered into my master inventory, this is the total amount that has been invoiced. In my case, haven't yet sold this 27082 MP filter. Committed and on order is relative to committed is the total count of these parts that exist on outstanding work in progress tickets. So for example, if I was to go back into Jennifer Quinn, I was going to add that 27082 MP, and I add that onto my transaction. When I click on OK and OK one more time, it's now on a work in progress ticket. The fact that it's not assigned to a job, somewhat irrelevant. As we come back into our inventory window, I'm going to close back out of here. I'm going to come back into View Edit one more time. And when I do, we're going to go ahead and we're going to search for that 27082 MP again. I apologize. Hang with me 1 second. 27082 MP is my part number, and as I search for it, you notice first off my on-hand value shows as 3 as opposed to 4 when I search this window here. In this parts list window, this on-hand value is actually available for sale. It is not owned in terms of that actual part number. When I click on OK, what that parts list window actually shows us is I've got 4 of them on my shelf. Let me click on Edit to get back into where we can see this a little bit easier. 4 on my shelf, 1 committed, so I have 3 available for sale. So that committed value is indicative of the total number of those that are on outstanding or open work in progress tickets. On order is indicative of the total number that are on outstanding purchase orders in PO management. So if I saw a value that was on order and I needed that particular part, I could go look to see if it's on an order that's coming in soon or whether I want to go ahead and order that part hotshot or just time delivery. So we've got committed and on order, which again, you'll notice can't modify those values because they're counting a specific number from either the open work in progress tickets or the open purchase orders. As we continue on in this box here, to the left there is stock, non-stock, and consigned. And this really comes into play for two primary purposes. The first one is as we add a part onto a transaction, and as I'm adding that part onto my transaction for Jennifer Quinn, I put the oil filter on, and over here on the right-hand side it says that that part is going to come out of my stock. That is an item that I stock. If I have a part that's flagged as non-stock, and as it adds onto my transaction, it'll get flagged as non-stock and will want me to post an AP transaction for it because it's saying that it isn't something that I should have in my local inventory. Now, if you notice, there is stock, non-stock, and consigned as there are available designates for that part itself. As we're looking at this window and we add something on that's stock, it'll always come through as stock. If it's non-stock, it gets added as non-stock. If it's a consigned item, then when it gets added onto my transaction, it's going to go ahead and it's going to show up as a stock item. Now, stock, non-stock, and consigned is also relevant as I'm doing reporting in my inventory. So if I wanted to look up, say, a total dollar value of inventory, or what we call a part stock value summary report, I can tell the system I'd like to see parts that are stocking items, non-stocking items, and or consigned items, and or some combination of all three. So as we add parts onto transactions, whether or not we've got AP transactions that we want to get recorded, and or whether we wanted to make sure as we go through reporting we can track stock, non-stock, and or consigned, we can do that as well. As we go through, we've also got a box or a drop down there that says lock status. In the lock status, we've got unlocked, we've got locked, and locked with price minimum. So the way that this functions is as we add a part onto a transaction, we can flag it as either unlocked, locked, or locked with price minimum. If a part is locked and we add this part onto the transaction, then the price of the part is going to be locked at $6.99. I'll need a certain security level to go ahead and overwrite and or change that price. Locked with price minimum says we can go up from $6.99, but we cannot go down. So it could go to $7.99 or $8.99 or $10.99. It can't go to $5.99 or $4.99 without having some sort of approval. So we've got unlocked, locked, and locked with price minimum. As we move through our View Add Edit window, the second tab says Other Information. If I go to the Other Information tab, this is just some additional information that we have the ability to capture about a particular part, starting with the location in the upper left-hand corner. If I have a large warehouse of inventory, I might want to be able to quickly see where a part would be housed. So I could put either an aisle or a bin or however we've designated our inventory and flag that in the location. The start date is the first date this part was entered into our master inventory. As we move over to the right, core charge or fee 1 and fee 2. Now, fee 1 would be where a core charge would be recorded if there was one applicable for this part, and or if there were any taxes and or fees. When we talk about tires in Illinois, where I'm located, we pay $2.50 to the state for every tire that gets sold. So each tire has a $2.50 state tire fee associated. I also charge a disposal fee. So as we look at parts that may have an applicable fee with those get recorded at the top of this Other Information window. As we continue to the right, whether a part is taxable or not, a menu part would get added onto a transaction. The consumer would not get charged the price for the part. However, the cost would be recorded for profitability purposes, and the on-hand would get adjusted in order to make sure that our on-hand value is appropriate inventory as well. Beneath that, where it says No Smart Pricing, when we go through smart pricing, and we had a webinar recently about our smart price functionality, we can apply our smart pricing to all the parts in our master inventory. If you flag a part as no smart pricing, it tells the system that it should just use the default cost plus multiplier, not smart pricing, to price that part, or it should leave the part alone if we're over in smart pricing and applying that pricing to our master inventory. As an example, I might have my oil costed for my bulk at $1.09. That's just my standard cost for a quart of 5W30 oil. If I look at my matrix says any parts from $0 to $5, we're going to mark up 5 times. So if I was to apply my pricing matrix to that oil, well, $1.09 times 5 becomes $5.45 with my rounding parameter, $5.99 for a quart of oil. And by the time I put 5 quarts of oil into that 5W30 oil change at $29.99, I have very little room to record the price of a filter and or whatever labor that I'm charging the consumer for as well. So no smart pricing basically says as we apply smart pricing, don't do it to this particular part record. And to the right of that, the last checkbox out there says no supply fee. If I wanted to add a part onto a transaction and I was charging shop supplies, but I didn't want the selling price of that part to be included in that shop supply calculation, I can tell it not to charge supply fees. So again, if I had, let's say, a set of tires that was $600 and I'm charging 5% as my shop supply fee, well, $600 at 5% would add an extra $30 onto the transaction. If I prefer to not charge supply charges on a tire, and each one can be flagged with that checkbox, and then that $600 for that set of 4 tires wouldn't be included as part of that shop supply calculation. The manufacturer's number is just a notation box. Again, if I was stocking the part from multiple different vendors, I might tie them together based upon the manufacturer's number. That would be consistent from one to the other. The warranty, indicative of, in most cases, the number of months. 3 as a limited warranty, 12 or 24 in terms of a year, and or when we get to tires, looking at the miles that a tire might be warranted for, you put that value in here as well. To the right of that, if we're working closely with a vendor, they will sometimes provide us what's called a popularity, meaning how often do they sell it. It's an A, B, C, or D mover. Is it a number 1, 2, 3, or 4 in terms of how frequently they sell it or how popular it might be in terms of their sales? Just helps us to potentially assess whether or not we want to stock a part and or reorder. Beneath that, there's an option that says linked part number and linked line code. Now I'm going to go back over into our writer for just a second. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dump the part number onto a transaction. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put in there the part number is .cl, which if I search my master inventory, you'll find it's a part number that I've got in the system for an exhaust clamp. I'll click on OK. And when I click on OK one last time to add that onto the transaction, what you'll notice is it adds on the exhaust clamp and the exhaust hardware, although my spelling leaves a bit to be desired. The way that that works is it's a linked part number. So if I came back into inventory, view, add, edit, and I searched for that part number .cl, and I went ahead and I looked at that part number there, what I'll find is in the other information tab, it's got .hw with a line code of BLK linked to it. We link one part to another, meaning I linked .hw, my generic part number for exhaust hardware, to .cl, my generic part number for an exhaust clamp. Because anytime I add a clamp, I want to add the hardware on as well. So you can add and link part 2 to part 1. You can also link part 3 to part 2. You can daisy chain them together, link 4 to 3 and 5 to 4 and so on. And as you add part number 1, it would add 2, 3, 4, and 5. It would just continue to follow the sequence of those parts that are linked together. If I added part 3, it doesn't swim upstream, meaning it wouldn't add part 2 and part 1, but it would add part 3, 4, and 5. So linked part number is just a way to say when I add this part number, I'd like to add these parts along with it. Beneath that, there's a section that says labor information, category, operation, time, rate, and charge. This is somewhat of an antiquated methodology. However, for shops that don't have an integrated electronic labor guide, still used with some degree of frequency, meaning if I went to add a part onto a transaction, in this case, we're going to add a 101935. It's a muffler. Don't have it on my shelf. However, I could get it from my local vendor. When I click on OK to add it onto the ticket and then OK one last time, first off, it tells me that I don't have this part in stock. I'd like it to switch to non-stock because I'm going to have to post my outside purchase transaction. What you'll notice is when I did that, it added on muffler, remove, and replace as my labor job that goes along with that part. So I could have the part drive the labor. If I went back and looked at that part number we just searched for, that was a 101935 muffler, and when I find that part number there, on that other information tab, what I'll see is that tells the system that to add the category of exhaust and add the job muffler, remove, and replace whenever I add that part onto a transaction. Also says add 1 hour at $85 per, which works out to be $85 as the total time. If I was to look at in configuration for that particular labor operation, if I went and said, well, let's see what we have as the standard book time for that muffler, remove, and replace, it's in my category for exhaust, and underneath my jobs, it was number 130, muffler, remove, and replace, which by default has a time of 0.3 of an hour or $25.50 as the charge. When I added that particular part onto it, what it did was it upped the labor charge to 1.3 hours, added 1 hour to, and 110.50 as the selling price to the consumer. Getting back down to inventory, a few last items here, and I apologize. Again, I'm run over my time just a bit. For those of you that have been on these webinars with me throughout 2015, you may find that to be a bit of a consistency. So my apologies for going just a bit longer than expected. But as we go through, the sales history is a rolling 12-month sales history, or the reality is it's 11 months and the current month. So as we look at it right now, this represents July of 2014 through December of 2014, January of 2015 through May of 2015, and then June 1st through June 11th of 2015. So this is month to date. So the month you're currently in does month to date. A couple of last tabs there. We've got our notes tab, which, again, it's a way that we can capture something about this part. It's only accessible through the View Add Edit window. It will not print on the documents we give to either a technician or a consumer, but it's here if you wanted to record some information about a particular part. The last tab that's over there says tire information. As I click on that tab there, and the system doesn't show me anything at all, and that's because, well, this is a muffler. It's not a tire. If I was to go in and look at that hand-cooked tire, so I'll click on Save, and my part number for that tire was HANK 1010383. There's that tire that I had 4 of those on my shelf, and if you notice in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little box there that says tire. Even when I click on Edit, bring up the window, that box still does not change. That box is what drives this tire information tab, and that box is driven by the department it's associated with. So if I took this and put it into a department that was not a tire, that box goes away. My tire information tab, just a big blank gray screen. I went back and I put it back into one of my tire departments. My checkbox reappears, and now my tire information tab is available, where I can see things like my speed and load rating, my tread depth, my UTQG, and or if there was a federal excise tax associated with a tire. One last piece before we finish our conversation today. I'm going to click on Save to close back out of there. And the difference between View Add Edit and inventory entry is as follows. I'm going to add a new part number into my inventory. I've started stocking a new line of filtration products, and it's ABC123 is the first part number we're going to add. I hit the Enter key, and it tells me that that's not a known part number in my master inventory, so we're going to add a new part number. Description is oil filter. It's going to cost me $1.58, which I'm going to sell for $7.99 is my default pricing, or if I went down and I assigned it my department and said, well, now calc the prices. I'm buying those from AutoWares as my vendor, and $1.15 is my acquisition cost. Line code is XYZ. It's a stocking item, and any other information I'd like to enter as well. When I click on Save, well, now I'd like to go add my next part. So I would enter in all that same information again. If I go into inventory entry, and I was going to do the same thing. Well, let's see, the part number is going to be ABC124. So again, that's a new part. It's an oil filter. Cost on those is going to be $1.58, coming from my vendor AutoWares. The department is going to be filters-oil. Let me establish my selling prices, my line code of XYZ, and as well as the fact that it's a stocking part. When I click on Save, what you'll notice is the only thing that goes away is the part number and the line code. So now I need to add ABC125, line code XYZ. And I hit Save, and I can continue on as long as this information was consistent. Even if I had to make little changes to it, it saves me the need to have to enter in information like department, supplier, description, time and again. And now if I was to go search for ABC as a part, you'll notice there's 123, 124, 125. I've added those part numbers. So inventory entry maintains the information as we're going through and adding multiple parts. So again, if I'm adding in a line of relatively consistent parts, much easier to make my subtle changes. Maybe the price is variable one to the other, as opposed to having to re-enter all of the information as we go through.